and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we have an innovator interview today that's surprising and wide-ranging. We're joined by Adam Met, who is probably best known to you as the bassist in the band AJR, which is Adam and his brothers Jack and Ryan. They've got many hits in the indie pop world, multi-platinum artists. They're getting ready for their 2020-2021 world tour, supporting their most recent album, Neo Theater. And Adam is also the UN Development Program's Sustainable Development Advocate. In other words, he's working with the UN to spread the word about global sustainability. Adam, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Mitch.
Well, Adam, you've got an incredible background. You're a top-selling pop artist. You are a Ph.D. candidate in the UK, studying remotely during the pandemic. You are working across a wide range of fields. Why has sustainability become so important to you as a young adult?
Yeah, I mean, I work in so many different fields, like you mentioned, and the music world that I've lived in has taken me all over the world. I mean, we've been everywhere across Europe to Australia, of course, across the US. We were supposed to be in South America this year. We were supposed to be doing an Asian tour this year. Obviously, none of that happened. But the fact that we're exposed to people of so many different races, genders, religions, outlooks on life, I kind of learned from them and heard everything that they were saying, even outside of the music space, and the challenges that they were facing and the ideologies they took on. And it made me want to, at the beginning, continue my academic work. And that's what I did. I mean, I stayed in school, I did my master's, and now, like you mentioned, I'm finishing up my Ph.D. And sustainability, because it's about so much more than climate, it is so interdisciplinary, and I'm sure we can talk about this later. It touches people in so many different ways. And it felt like the right way to address these concerns and interests of the people that I met all over the world while touring.
Well, now, when you get out there and you see the entire world, your perspective changes. Do you see that everyone recognizes they have similar problems with regards to sustainability?
Yeah, there are definitely pieces of sustainability that are more prevalent in certain places. Climate change is, of course, prevalent everywhere, but the fact that people recognize it so much more strongly as an emergency in places like Europe, as opposed to the United States, is concerning to me. But also, in the United States, inequality is such a huge problem. And right now, especially right now, in the midst of COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, we're really starting to reckon with that. So because sustainability has all of these different facets, it's leaning in different directions in the different places that we travel to.
Now, for a developed world citizen, why is sustainable development in the emerging economies going to be important to us? I think that's a basic question that, while many people take for granted, is what flips the bit for somebody from caring to being completely indifferent to it.
Absolutely. Sustainable development in emerging economies is absolutely vital, especially because of something called systems thinking. Mm-hmm. And so many people see sustainability as tackling climate change or being more environmental. But the fact that developing an education system or developing systems to protect life on land or life underwater, building cities, healthcare systems, all of these things are related to sustainability. And when you're in an emerging economy or a developing country, and you have the ability to rebuild any of these systems, they can all contribute to sustainability. So there are countries that have passed legislation that require environmental programs to be taught in school from the time people start at the earliest levels, which is incredible. And there are places, obviously not the United States, but there are places where healthcare is a free human right that is granted to everybody. And if you look at people that are living in poverty and in really deep inequality, their access to healthcare might not be as strong as other people. And if you're able to develop a system where healthcare is universal, that is such a big step forward in the fight against climate change and in the sustainable development idea itself.
Well, we as a planet, we've raised an immense number of people out of poverty globally over the course of the past 50 years, but we also know that the way we did it was extremely inefficient. Do you see the emerging economies as being able to achieve equitable prosperity without amplifying their climate impact beyond the Earth's capacity to support it?
Equitable prosperity is a very difficult thing to define because, yes, based on the metrics and the targets and the indicators we have today, specifically of the Sustainable Development Goals, and Sustainable Development Goal number 1 is no poverty. Yes, we have lifted a lot of people out of poverty, but that is a very specific metric that we're using. There are development banks across the world that have done, in some cases, a great job at supporting communities to both get them out of poverty and develop sustainably at the same time. I'm thinking specifically of the African Development Bank, which has done a really excellent job in some countries of pursuing renewable energy projects that employ local communities. But at the same time, they're also violating significant human rights laws across the countries. And this is something that I'm actually working on for my Ph.D., this kind of trade-off between human rights and sustainable development that we see in some places. But to answer your question, I think there is a way to pursue this idea of pulling people out of poverty in a sustainable way by focusing on what the U.S. has been calling building back green, or focusing on renewable resources. If you can focus the development dollars on pulling people out of poverty and moving those countries in a more renewable direction, then that is the kind of development that I see as more sustainable.
So really, we need a new set of metrics for what success is, it sounds like. And the traditional profit-driven capitalism, while it was effective at instigating progress, isn't effective at instigating sustainable progress. And we need to rethink that. As a UN development advocate, how do you participate in helping people understand and come to terms with those new metrics?
It's all about translating into language that people want to participate with. And that sounds very strange, but in 2015, the UN came up with this set of goals that are the Sustainable Development Goals. They came out of the Millennium Development Goals a few years before, and they made these goals really simple on the outset, and this kind of sheen on top of them are pretty simple. Yes, we need to improve education around the world, but then there are very specific targets and indicators that they want to achieve. And my work with the UNDP is specifically to make these targets and indicators understandable to people of, the millennial and Gen Z generation. And one of the things that I have found really works is this idea of incentives. Now, you can have millions and millions of celebrities create videos online saying, this is what sustainability is. You should be riding a bike more. You should be recycling more. And people will kind of start to participate in that education process, but they won't go deeper. They won't actually take the action in their own lives. And I mean, at some point we can talk more about individual action and the role that plays in sustainability. But I found that incentives are the real, are the kind of crux of what we need to be focusing on to get people involved in, being more sustainable in their lives. And so you say we do need a new set of metrics. I think we need a new set of metrics that can help translate that individual action into something larger. Because right now the metrics focus on governments, because governments are the ones that took the pledges to achieve these goals. It's not corporations, it's not individuals, it's government. We need metrics that can help add up all the individual actions of individuals so people can feel like the work that they're putting in actually is contributing to achieving these goals that the world has agreed on. So that's that point of it. And then this idea of incentives, how do we get people to do something? We reward them for it. So whether it's, tax breaks for buying LED light bulbs as opposed to, light bulbs that cost a lot more and use a lot more electricity, or participating in recycling programs. Those kind of incentives are the ways to build individual action. And that's the kind of thing that I like to amplify with my role at the UNDP.
So do you see within the economy a lot of opportunity for new job categories that would support the health of the planet as well as the prosperity of humans?
Yes, I do. And one of the strongest places for new job opportunities is within companies that have traditionally been fossil fuel companies. Mm-hmm. Because as much harm as they're doing to the planet, they are investing millions in renewable energy resources. And one of the things I was talking about a lot in the beginning of COVID is putting together an education system for people who are no longer at work and are on unemployment to train them to be in renewable energy jobs. And if there are a lot of people that are really well trained in renewable energy jobs, it's going to encourage the Chevrons and the BPs of the world to move faster in the renewable energy space. And yes, of course, we know that, solar makes sense, wind makes sense, and the big problem is storage and really figuring out how to store this electricity. But that is the next step. If we're now training this whole new generation of engineers to work on the storage problem, we have all of these people who are out of work and trained in engineering. They can be focused on solving that problem. And of course, There are many other problems, but I see that as something that we really should be focusing on.
So that's the catalyst. Now, you described being a storyteller a few moments ago as we were talking about what you do as an advocate. And obviously, you're a storyteller as a musician, and you're about to launch a new podcast called Planet Reimagined. Can you tell us what you're going to be doing on the show?
Absolutely. This podcast frames the conversation around sustainability as something that's exciting, new, and cool. And historically, sustainability has been focused on climate and the doom and gloom effect. And we've had a lot of incredible voices educating the world about climate, from, Greta to Al Gore to even AOC. And they've all done a great job educating people, but it's all focused on the emergency. And not that it's not an emergency. Of course, this is an emergency. But like I was talking about it before, this idea of incentivizing people to get involved in projects and get involved in sustainability is going to come from sharing the fact that this is something cool and new and fresh. So we have episodes on everything from the future of food and how you can become plant-based. And you don't necessarily need to go vegetarian or vegan. You can take small steps. We have episodes with Jeff Sachs, where we talk about these goals that we mentioned before. We have an episode coming out with Andrew Yang, where he talks about universal basic income and how we can use that to help move more sustainably. We have episodes on music and sports, things that you wouldn't think necessarily relate to sustainability, but actually do in a lot of surprising ways. And then the cool thing about this podcast is that for every person who subscribes, we're planting a tree. So that's where the incentive piece of it comes in. You get your education, and you also get to plant a tree. So you get your vegetables along with your dessert.
So where can people subscribe? I just want to ask while we're talking about it.
Absolutely. You can subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google, and it's available everywhere you can listen.
Okay, so that's Planet Reimagined. Folks, search on it. It is going live this week. And what would you... let's talk a little about the fact that you yourself are an influencer of a lot of individual behavior because you perform in front of audiences of tens of thousands of people. How does AJR, the band, stay sustainable, and what do you look for in the venues you go to in terms of sustainability? You mentioned sports a moment ago. When 100,000 people get together, there's a lot of waste. When the same is true with a concert. What do you guys do to help drive a sustainable behavior, not just be sustainable yourself?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And for us, it's all about making the right partnerships. I mean, Sustainable Development Goal number 17 is called partnerships. And yes, that is for countries to become partners with each other. But I'm kind of taking that and translating it to the individual and the corporate level. We have a lot of partnerships with AJR. Our promoters, we work with them from beginning to end. So when there are significant amounts of carbon put into the atmosphere from our work, which we try and avoid as much as possible. And I can talk a bit about that. Mm-hmm. We do cover carbon offsets. So we plant trees, pull plastic out of the ocean, and it's not a perfect solution and it's not a catch-all, but we definitely offset the carbon we put out there. We also have worked with the venues, and we're now providing more vegetarian options for food at the venues, and all of the packaging that is used for the food now is all recyclable. And so between that and the silverware we use at the venue, we use almost all bioplastic. Mm-hmm. When we're backstage, all of the kind of catering, as much as possible, we work with local vendors for food and local farmers to bring in food, so there won't be as much CO2 put into the atmosphere because of transportation. And even with our bus, there are partners that we've worked with, and we've done a biodiesel and types of fuels that put far less CO2 into the atmosphere. So we do these things ourselves, but at the same time, we educate our fans. We have, created videos explaining the kind of steps that we're taking. You can see some of those on our YouTube channel. One of them is called Partners in Touring, and we talk about our climate change work. One of the other things we do is at the merchandise table. We donate a percentage of the proceeds to different organizations. We register people to vote in the lobby of nearly every show that we do.
Keep that up.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It's something we're even going to try and start doing with our virtual events, too. But it's not just about registering to vote and voting. It's about educating yourself on who the right people to vote are, especially on the local and state level. And something that's really important to me is the fact that a lot of sustainable change can happen locally and at the state level, and a lot faster than it can be done at the federal level. So New York, for example, is investing a lot in wind energy, and I think that's great. And if you find the right people to vote for lower down on the ticket, not just the president, that are supporting those kinds of initiatives, that's the way that we need to be voting.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago the idea of lots of celebrities publishing videos and stories about how and why to be sustainable, but the individual out there really is looking at everybody around them to find models they can adopt. And I think a lot of the times when we talk about celebrity missions, we tend to separate the celebrity from the fact that they're just another individual modeling good behavior. What kind of behavior are you recommending an individual take today? You mentioned voting, but are there impacts that they can have by changing what they buy and what they eat that you would encourage people to adopt?
Absolutely. At this point, for somebody who has eaten meat their entire life, it's difficult to make the transition and go completely vegan or completely vegetarian cold turkey. But there are options to kind of take slow steps toward it. And if everyone took on Meatless Monday, which is just one day a week not eating meat, we would prevent so much methane from going into the atmosphere, which is a far stronger greenhouse gas than even carbon dioxide. So there are companies that are doing amazing jobs at transitioning people off of meat. And so some of those are Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. You might have heard these. You might have heard of them. They've done really great work. So that's one. There's ways to kind of be more plant-based as opposed to taking the full leap into veganism or vegetarianism. The second is about single-use plastic. And I know many people have seen the campaign for straws. And it's great that we're using less straws, but straws are not even close to the biggest problem. There are so many pieces of plastic out there, especially now during COVID-19, the number of masks and the amount of PPE that's ending up in the oceans. Recycling is a really big issue, but understanding what recycling is. There's a great documentary, I'm blanking on the name of it now, but understanding that most cities and states in America don't actually end up recycling the things that you are putting in the recycle bin. So if you are in a position where you can compost things, there are worms and other types of insects that have the capability of eating through single-use plastic. It sounds weird and sounds strange, but there are insects that are capable of doing that. And so composting waste in your backyard is another great solution. I mean, moving to light bulbs that are, longer lasting and not as bad for the environment. Making sure you are actually using your dishwasher, because surprisingly, using a dishwasher uses far less water than washing your dishes in the sink. Those kind of like small actions will add up to larger change.
And do you think that the individual as a consumer can have an impact by making changes in what they buy? And can celebrities help amplify the voice of their fans about certain types of products that they would like to see eliminated?
Yes, I think individuals can definitely have an impact, but the way that individuals are going to have an impact is if they're vocal about it. Yes,
Right.
They can go to the store and choose one product or another, but they need to be vocal to even their own social media followers, which might not be that large of a circle, but they're something called micro-influencers. And micro-influencers are extremely powerful because you're much more likely to take advice from your friend or your family members than a celebrity that you see online, because you trust them and know them personally.
Yep.
So if you have this micro-influence over your friends and family and you're saying, oh, I'm choosing this product over another, that is really strong bond influence, much stronger than a celebrity would have. So if you're making that change, definitely go and post about it on social media. And remind me what the second half of your question was, please.
Can celebrities help aggregate that feedback in such a way that they could influence individual companies to make changes?
Absolutely. So celebrities are the ones that can actually do what you're saying. They can collect those social media posts and say, look, XYZ company, all of these people are making a change and being very vocal about it. You should consider making this change. And over the last few years, many large companies have started to make pledges that are saying that they're going to become carbon neutral or even carbon negative within the next 10 years. And I think that is a lot of that has to do with individual action adding up to something that companies are really caring about, which is their bottom line.
Yes, and that is what they care about. We need to find new ways, as we were talking about before, to create leverage against their existing priorities. So let me ask, as you launch Planet Reimagined, the podcast, what gives you hope?
The hope I see is the millennials, the Gen Zs, and then the next generation. I believe they're Gen A, because we're starting from scratch again. The ones that are taking
what goes
to the
around
streets,
comes around.
Exactly. The way that they're taking to the streets and doing work beyond saying, we need our government to do this, we need companies to do this. The way that they're asking for specific actions from individuals, protests now are not just to kind of rebel against the man. They're about to educate. They're about educating people and educating the public about these issues. Look at Greta. Greta is the kind of person that really inspires me to work. She is significantly younger than I am, but for weeks and weeks and weeks, she was the only person who sat outside striking from school. And look at what her movement turned into just by having a single sign that saying she was striking for the climate.
Well, we can all make a difference. I think that's a great place to conclude this conversation. But Adam Met, we would love to have you back and talk more in the future. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Well, thank you, Adam Met. Folks, you know Adam is the bassist of AJR, but you can tune in every week to Planet Reimagined, his new podcast. Check it out on your favorite podcast subscription site. And we'll be back soon with another innovator interview. This is Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we'll be back with another interview soon. Take care, everyone.